I got a question from someone called Allegra, one of my email subscribers, and she has a few issues on time management. She is a student, and this is what she said. She had quite a few questions on what to do. So the first one was, how do we know if we're doing too much? This is something that is addressed quite often in productivity, and I highly recommend you check out some of Eventual Millionaire's podcasts for proof about what I'm about to say, because that podcast interviews a lot of millionaires, and some of their most recent episodes interviewing female entrepreneurs. This is where I've taken this advice from. And basically, the signs that you are doing too much, you're managing too many priorities, revolve around if you start feeling burnt out, if you start feeling overwhelmed, if you start feeling stressed, or if you start feeling like you have too many things going on. Another sign is if you start getting angry or frustrated or mad about small things or tasks that you normally don't get stressed about because they're not getting done right or something else is going on. And then the final sign is that if you have more than 3 to 5 major priorities in a day. 5 is already borderline red flag. So that's how you kind of know. Those are the big signs. The next question is it absolutely necessary to focus only on one thing to be successful? Now, this is a somewhat new productivity concept that has been popularized by Essentialism, a well-known productivity/life advice book, as well as The One Thing by Gary Keller, as well as mainly interviews of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, where he basically tells this story about how Bill Gates' dad went around the room and asked everyone, what's the one word that led to your success? And of course, turns out Bill Gates and Warren Buffett both said focus. And so that was a highly cited study, maybe oversighted. Everyone keeps referencing it on productivity blogs to the point where it's like maybe a bit beaten to death. Just because 2 out of the thousands of billionaires said focus doesn't mean it's necessarily some huge correlation. The data set isn't there. It's a small sample size. However, of course, focus is incredibly important. Both of those people were laser focused. The answer is no. One thing is just a benchmark. I believe that the main theme about all these concepts is that simplifying is incredibly important, but you don't have to boil it down to one single thing. I mean, if you look at anyone who is generally successful throughout their life, they, by definition, have more than one priority. It's just that their priorities aren't a list of 100 or a list of 50. For example, some people might really care about family time, and others may really care about health. That's already 2 things technically. And then others may care about work. So that's 3 priorities that they're focusing on. What I think the big thing you should take out of it is that when you're doing something, you focus on just that thing. You block out all distractions, put blinders on, lock yourself away in a room so you don't get interrupted. And when you're doing that thing, you focus on it for 30 minutes, an hour. Then you could take a break. But during that actual activity, you are focused on that. So hopefully that answers your question. Another final thing I want to say about that is just simplify. Like if you have too many things going on blocked out in a day, it may work for you, but perhaps not. Most people who are successful really have their big blocks and big priorities in order first. Warren Buffett, if you check out his calendar, he's shown his calendar on interviews by Charlie Rose. He only has like 1 or 2 or 3 things, sometimes per week or per month, that he has to deal with. The rest of his calendars are empty, even though he could fill it up with hundreds of things. And Bill Gates, on the other hand, he maps out like every minute of his day, from how long he showers until every single task beyond that. And so it's another lesson that productivity is a bit fluid in the sense that based off your personality type, there is wiggle room. So, it's something that you want to try. That leads to the next question Allegra had, which is, for what I've tried in the past, it never worked when I tried to schedule out each day and plan out each hour of my day. This didn't work, and eventually I tried a few other things. She says, which of course didn't work out that good, as things can easily come up in life, and it's not the smartest way to try to manage time/projects. Other than that, I've tried to establish more productive routines, but I didn't know exactly how to go about doing that. So I've always had a problem with organization and figuring out how I should break down my time day to day. So for school, it's definitely different in the sense that you're bound to a location for a certain amount of time. Technically, work is similar unless you run your own business, which case you can kind of like shift things around more than most people. So here's how I mastered productivity as a student. There are non-negotiables that are naturally high priority. And these are the first things you have to figure out what they are. For most students, aspiring students, the first thing is attending school. You can't skip out on classes and stuff because for most students, this is non-negotiable if you want to get good grades. Therefore, that's your first priority. The exception to this would be if you're some type of genius student who can, get good grades without going to school and you self-teach or whatever. Another exception would be if you really don't care about school, you're interested in being an entrepreneur, and you're already seeing your business take off. Those are like the only main exceptions. But for most people, that will be your non-negotiable. Other than that, what other non-negotiables are there? For me, health and fitness are huge, but for other people, it's on the back burner a bit. And so you really have to figure out what those are. For me, other than school, it was getting my homework done outside of school, preparing for tests. So it all revolved around getting good grades for school. And then everything else kind of fell below that because as a student, you want the best grades you can to get into, a better school if you're still in high school, or to get a good job once you graduate, or to get into grad school or med school. So grades were the most important, and everything involving or related to grades were non-negotiables at the top of your list. From there, you kind of want to, if you want to dive deeper, you can look at that school stuff and you say, okay, which of these can I miss out on and it doesn't matter? Which of these, if I skip doing the homework or studying, will really impact my grades? And you can prioritize those mini projects within school that way. So let's say you really need an A on this next final or midterm. Otherwise, you're not going to get an A or even a B in this class. Versus you have some other homework assignment that doesn't matter because you have a 99.7% in the class. You're acing the class. And even if you fail the next 3 tests, you're still going to get an A in the class. Well, that's something you can probably skip. So those are extreme examples, but you kind of want to bottle it down a little bit and use that prioritization system. So if it's something that's less useful, maybe okay, it matters a bit more. This could impact your grades, but if you get a B on this or C, you'll still have the A, but it won't be as high of an A. And then if you get a B or C on the next thing, you'll fail. Well, that's still important, but it's not extremely important. And what's more important is the first thing you gotta do is go home and study for this test, because if you don't get an A on this test, you're gonna get a C in the class. That's gonna be your first thing you do. So you always start with the most important thing you do when you get home and you have time to study and do homework. So that's the main prioritization system you're using with school. Of course, I did a bunch of other activities that were also projects outside of school, such as I was running track and field. I was also part of a few student organizations, including Future Business Leaders of America. I was also involved in piano, so I competed on on the statewide level in competitive solo piano and duet piano competitions that required an hour to 2 hours of practice per day. And of course, I had to study for the SAT, put 1 to 2 hours in, and so on and so forth. And there's all these other activities, but school came first, studying for school came first, and then everything else, if I had to skip it, I had to skip it. But then after school, you go to the next thing, which is maybe, for me, it was SAT, when the SATs were upon me in the next year or 2 years, where I had to take the test, and these were the final times I had to take them. But then once that subsided, then I shifted and I stopped. If I skipped SAT, it didn't matter as much. And so your priorities kind of like cascade downwards, if that makes sense. The big thing I want to get at is that there are priorities that people are just not prioritizing right, and you can't beat yourself up if you don't have all the things done. You just do the best you can, and if you miss out or have to skip a few of those things, or you're feeling burnt out and you need to relax and watch some TV, Netflix, YouTube for a while, that's fine. Gary Vaynerchuk has a quote. It says, you can't be too hard on yourself. Even this high-performing entrepreneur, he's had situations where he had to skip out on family time because of work and work because of family time, but he does the best he can. He doesn't have to be 100% there. He just needs to miss the major upsets. For him, that means like if his children end up becoming spoiled brats that are horrible people in this world, that's a huge red flag. Or if his business goes bankrupt. Those are the really only two major upsets that he cares about, and in a sense, both aren't happening. So you don't have to be some type of perfect person who gets everything done. You just have to do the best you can, and this fear or this belief of perfectionism is maybe something that's crippling you. And then back to my other point on not prioritizing things that you think are important but aren't. Some subscribers have written into me saying that like, oh, I'm a student, but I'm also trying to run this like digital online business, and then I'm trying to get into Shopify, and then I'm taking these online marketing classes, and it's like, why does that even matter if you're in school? Because you're so young, you have all this time in the world. Why don't you focus on school and then get some good grades, and then after you graduate from school and you have that as a something on your resume, then you could get a good job, and you always have that on the back burner if your digital business fails. But if you're juggling both at the same time, you may end up with bad grades, and your business is going to be mediocre because you can't put enough time into it. So like, why don't you don't have to do it all now unless you really, really feel like your business is taking off and making a lot of money. Then perhaps you just want to focus all your time towards that and skip school. Or what Mark Zuckerberg did was he took time off from Harvard completely because he knew that he could return to Harvard at any time, even 5 or 10 years after, and focus on school if his business didn't turn out. So I think there's a bit of impatience there, and this idea that you have to do both at the same time, which you end up doing both in mediocrity. If you really want to do something on the side, then do it on the side, and don't complain or feel like it's a loss if you can only put 3 or 6 hours per week into it. There are plenty of side hustles, digital side hustles, that require little time, like selling on Amazon via fulfillment by Amazon. These types of side hustles you can start and stop anytime, and they only take a couple hours at max. And on top of that, you can start and stop them without having it take over your life. And then if you can't get to it, or you can't put as much time into it, no big deal, because your main focus of school or work doesn't get in the way. So that's she asked a few more questions, but I want to address the main ones because I think a lot of other people have similar struggles. Thanks for watching this. I'll see you in the next video. Hit that subscribe button. Peace.